Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me this evening. We at the Department of Homeland Security think it's extremely important that we're constantly going out to communities and speaking to them and engaging them and making sure that they understand what we do and how we can be a partner in the work that they do, and also how we can serve communities better. Just to give you a little bit of background about the Department of Homeland Security that a lot of people don't really fully understand, the Department of Homeland Security is the largest domestic agency of any federal agency. So the largest is of course the Department of Defense. The second largest is the Department of State Department, and then the third largest agency is the Department of Homeland Security. And the first two departments, Department of Defense and Department of State, they only deal with outside the United States. So they're focused on defense and diplomacy outside of the U.S. So we are the largest agency that deals with American citizens and the domestic, basically borders and infrastructure of the United States. And being that, because we are the largest, we deal with the public the most of any federal agency. So most likely you deal with the Department of Homeland Security on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and you might not even know. And we'll go into that. At the airports, at the borders, in terms of critical infrastructure, domestically, if you go to a big shopping center, if you go to Tyson's Corner Mall, the Department of Homeland Security works to help protect that mall and to protect its infrastructure and security. If you go to a football game, or if you go to a baseball game or a basketball game, the stadiums are all looked at, part of the critical infrastructure that the Department of Homeland Security protects and make sure to keep safe. So we work in a very large way with the private sector, with nonprofit institutions, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those resources that we have available to even groups like yours and a place like this to keep it secure and to keep it to receive potential grants and to make sure that it's safe for people to serve. So we deal with the public to a large extent. And so what I'm going to do is to talk a little bit about how the Department of Homeland Security functions, what our role is, the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, our role. I'm sure you know that the Department of Homeland Security was established right after 9/11. So it is the youngest agency to be established. It's actually a teenager, so it's very, very, very new. Just to kind of make it very clear to you, when the president gives usually his State of the Union address, or actually, if the president, the succession plan, if he was to die or to be assassinated, or the next person in line is the vice president, and then the Speaker of the House, and then it continues, and then it goes to the cabinet, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. So, and that is done by. That is figured out by seniority of the departments. So the last department that would replace the president in case all of them were to be killed or die is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. So that's how new we are. After 9/11, we had a lot of different smaller agencies, like I'm sure you've heard of FEMA. FEMA helps with natural disasters and recovery and things of that sort. The Coast Guard, all of these different agencies were separate before 9/11. They are all now under one umbrella, which is the Department of Homeland Security. And under the Department of Homeland Security, we have 21 what we call component agencies. So TSA, CBP, which is Border Patrol, FEMA, Coast Guard, all of these different agencies fall under the mandate of the Department of Homeland Security. So, and our mandate is large. We have 6 mandates. That is the ports, the borders, immigration, internet infrastructure. So cybersecurity is also done under the Department of Homeland Security to protect the cybersecurity of the U.S. That is primarily the role of the Department of Homeland Security. So on a very kind of abstract level, that is what the Department of Homeland Security does on a day-to-day basis. So I'll give you a little bit of a background in terms of what we do and what specific agencies and how they impact you. And how, if you have an issue, or if you have a complaint, or if you have a grievance, how you can come to us and talk to us and the services that we provide for the public so that they can have a better experience as citizens when they deal with certain aspects of the Department of Homeland Security. This is just a basic organizational chart. I don't need to bore you with this, but this is the office of the Secretary, and our office is the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. The Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties was created when Congress created the Department of Homeland Security. Because we knew that once you have such a big agency, and every single day we actually have over 225,000 employees. 225,000 employees. When you go to the airport, you are dealing with someone in the Department of Homeland Security. When you cross the border, you're going to deal with someone in Homeland Security. When you apply for your immigration papers, you're going to deal with someone from the Department of Homeland Security immigration section. And so we understand that when we have so many people who are dealing with us, things are always not going to go right. And you also have some people who don't necessarily follow the laws when they're enforcing the laws. Unfortunately, we know that happens a lot. So Congress established the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties so that it has a mandate to look at all of the different activities and enforcement of the department, so that if something goes wrong, if people are not treated well, the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties is able to give recommendations. We have a mandate to investigate, and we have a compliance section where we look at specific cases. So on a daily basis, a lot of us in the office, we're dealing with cases of people who feel like their rights have been compromised, who feel that they were not treated well, who feel like they are not being treated fairly. So that is our primary role at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. Our office has close to 200 employees who look at different aspects of our department and try to advise the Secretary and the leadership of the department on what we can change and how we can make our work and our activities more friendly towards the public. So that is basic structure of the Department of Homeland Security. Like I said, the first one is, of course, the Department of Transportation Security Administration. So everyone at the airport that you deal with is under the mandate of the Department of Homeland Security. And I'm sure, when I go out to make presentations or we talk to people, a lot of times this is the biggest complaint that we have from people. How they're treated at the airports, and how they feel like they might be stopped, they might be delayed, they might be questioned. If someone is wearing a hijab or a turban or something of that sort, or has a specific type of clothing or has a specific background, they feel that they might be impacted. The Transportation Security Administration is generally a lot of the complaints that we get, especially from communities who are impacted by post 9/11 laws and procedures. So, and I'll go into a little bit of what we can do. So, if communities feel that if you're always being delayed at the airport, if you feel like you're missing a flight, you're being delayed, you're being pulled aside for extra screening or what we call secondary screening, you can speak to me. You can speak to the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. We can help in that process. A lot of times, I'm sure everybody knows, we have lists and databases that people might be on or people might get on, or there's name matches that happen. So we at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties are able to work with the TSA, with the Transportation Security Administration, and try to help people. We've been facing this a lot now with people who go to Turkey, to be honest. Because of what is happening in Syria, people who go to Turkey regularly are often stopped, are often delayed, are often asked questions that they feel is not appropriate. And so we've been dealing with a lot of people from Turkey, with a lot of Syrian Americans, with a lot of people who go into Turkey for either relief work or development work or business, and they feel that they're being delayed. So this is something that we have been getting a lot, especially since the crisis in Syria has started. People traveling to Turkey are being stopped, are being questioned, and I get a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails from people who travel to Turkey. So I will, at the end, I will have my contact information. If you feel that sometimes you get delayed, if you're going overseas, if you're traveling, or a family or friends, or within the community, people, this is happening to people, please reach out to me, and we will try to see what we can do to help people and to make that process a bit smoother. We have a specific process that we've called, it's called the TRIP process. We put people through, and then if that doesn't help, we'll try to take actions to help people with delays and things of that sort, because we have a lot of people who miss flights. A lot of people who completely miss flights and who will be delayed and who will be taken off flights. So it's important that we hear those concerns so that we can help make that a little bit better for help, basically inform TSA, but at the same time help the citizens as well. So the TSA is one of the areas that we focus on. The next is the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So this is an area where we've got borders. Our borders, on the northern side and then the southern borders as well. So we have a lot of border patrol people who come in through Canada or through the southern borders, or even certain airports. They might be dealing with CBP. Same thing. We have a lot of issues, unfortunately, of people who come in, and it impacts. They might be stopped at Dulles by CBP and asked, well, where did you go? Why did you go? And then beyond just the basic questions, people get into a bit more intrusive questions. And so if that happens, we'd like to hear about that, because it's not something that we can train those agents as well, because we do, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we do a lot of training for our agents as well to help them understand different communities, the people of different background, and what that means, because most of them don't have that type of understanding and exposure to communities, and especially minority communities. So the CBP is also an area that we have a lot of complaints from when it comes to communities. And if you do have complaints with any I highly suggest, when I tell people, if you travel and you are facing something, you feel that you are facing extra questioning or extra scrutiny or extra delay, always get the name of the agent. Make sure you get their name. You can get their name and their badge number. And you get their name, and you can ask them politely, sir, can I have your name and your badge number, or ma'am, your name or badge number. And then if you feel that they have done something or asked something of you that is beyond the basic questions, you can always reach out to us, and we can try to help, and we can try to address those issues. So CBP and TSA, we have been getting a lot of complaints from people who travel to Turkey, so that's why I wanted to bring those up specifically. So if you do have, or if people in the community have complaints, please get that to us so we can help and we can address it. Just actually, this morning I was working with someone who was of Syrian descent but travels to Turkey regularly for work, for relief work, and she's been missing flights and she's been getting delayed. So we were able to help her again solve some of those problems, where now she's no longer needing to be delayed or go to the airport 4 hours or 5 hours before her flight. So those are things that we can help with at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. The other thing that people don't know about is the Secret Service is also under the Department of Homeland Security. So, protection of the president, the national leadership, even foreign leaders who come to the U.S., that's all part of the Department of Homeland Security, and the Secret Service is part of our mandate as well. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, and this is also another area that I like to tell communities about, because if you have a lot of immigrant communities who applied for their green cards, for citizenship, for asylum, for certain visas, If you feel that there's a delay in your process or in your paperwork, you can reach out to us at CRCL. We can try to look into some of those cases of why you might be delayed, what is happening with the paperwork, what are some of the reasons. So USCIS, the Office U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, is something that we can help with as well. When we go into a lot of communities, especially now with asylum cases, we've been receiving a lot of asylum cases from that region, and people are waiting a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we would be able to help with people and their cases in terms of different immigration services. So USCIS is also something that we deal with. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Hopefully you would never have to deal with anyone from ICE. And maybe most of you are U.S. citizens, so you never have to deal with ICE. But if ever, they basically are the ones who enforce the immigration laws. So if someone has overstayed a visa, if someone has come in through fraudulent ways, they basically detain people who come in. And we deal with a lot of also these cases. Actually, the majority of our cases at CRCL that we deal with are immigration enforcement cases. These are people who feel like they were detained, or they were ICE agents came to their home to ask them questions. Hopefully you would never have to deal with it, but if you ever do and you feel that, or anyone from the community is impacted by the work of ICE or their enforcement, you can reach out to us directly, and it's something that we can help with and that we can try to resolve as well. Just last week, I got a case in Denver of someone who was undocumented, who was not a priority, because we have priority enforcement. So there are people who we enforce and deport based on, Congress passed laws. So it's based on people who are criminals, people who are drug traffickers. These are the people who usually, who get priority for enforcement. But once in a while, unfortunately, it happens where other people who also fall into that web. So we try to help those type of individuals to help kind of get them either out of detention centers or get them help in the immigration process. So these are things for the community to really understand. Coast Guard, I don't need to say much. I'm sure you probably won't be dealing with the Coast Guard too much, unless you like to take fishing trips out, deep sea fishing. You probably then will deal with the Coast Guard. But generally, you will not have to face dealing with the Coast Guard, because they basically protect our water ways and our coastlines. So the U.S. Coast Guard is also part of the Department of Homeland Security. I won't focus on this much, but this is the mission of the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, to ensure that civil rights and civil liberties of people are not diminished when we enforce and when we do our work at the Department of Homeland Security. That is our general overall mission. So a lot of the time that we do a lot of proactive advice. So things like this. We go out to communities and we inform communities. Most people are not aware that they are able to put up a complaint against the Department of Homeland Security or against ICE or against USCIS. So a lot of what we do is to go into communities, tell them that you have rights, and if you have a negative experience at the Department of Homeland Security, you should talk about it. Don't stay quiet about it. We have laws against people. People sometimes, especially from immigrant backgrounds, are afraid, if I was treated badly, if I say something, my case might be impacted, or my family might be impacted. We have laws against that. So if people feel like they've been impacted, we encourage them to come forward and with their complaints and their grievances. Public complaint resolution, like I mentioned, we step in and we take cases and we try to help the public. Those are some of the areas that we do in terms of our work at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. Engaging the public. Like we're doing now, we have regular quarterly roundtables in 16 cities across the country. Every quarter we go out, we listen to the public, we bring civil society groups, immigration groups, faith-based communities, and we try to help them understand and also get complaints from them. So I know some of the affiliates of the Rumi Forum and your organizations attend our quarterly roundtable, so they're constantly engaged with us. What we've decided to do more recently, domestically, is because of the political and the election cycle, unfortunately, and the heated rhetoric and the debate about Muslims, about Latino communities, immigrant communities, refugees, minority communities in general. Because of that whole public conversation and negative conversation, we are now focusing our forums on things like bullying. Because in schools, you live in Northern Virginia, you're pretty lucky because it's diverse. People of all backgrounds live here, so it's not as difficult. But schools in places like Colorado or Arizona or Missouri, Kentucky, there's a lot of bullying that takes place in schools of minority kids, of Muslim kids, of African American kids or Latino kids. And so we have dedicated a lot of our resources now to addressing issues of bullying. And I encourage you, even though you might be in a very diverse area, talk to your kids regularly about these issues. What we realize is a lot of kids, even though they may be bullied in school or made fun of, not just by students, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's by teachers who think that they can talk about something that's happening in the news, but they talk about it in a way where they make students feel uncomfortable and make students feel like they don't belong in that area, in the school or in the classroom. So when we do our forums regularly, we encourage parents, talk to your children about bullying. Make sure that they feel safe at school. Make sure that they feel safe at school from their fellow students and from their teachers as well. So you should be talking to your kids regularly, on a weekly basis. Everything okay in school? Are people making comments about you? Because this election cycle has unfortunately created a lot of hostility and a lot of hate that is out there, and people feel it, and students are feeling it on a regular basis as well. So why civil rights engagement? We've talked about this. Our primary job is to serve the American people, the American public. But we know that while we are doing that job, we also will make mistakes. People make mistakes. All DHS employees are people. We have people who are well-intentioned, some who are not so well-intentioned. And so that's why we do our work, to make sure that we're constantly hearing from the public, we're constantly hearing from communities, so that we know how to improve our work at the Department of Homeland Security. Part of our Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties is our community engagement work. Community engagement is about going into communities, talking to people, bringing them to our offices, having them speak to our leadership, to the secretary, to the leadership of the different departments. And I encourage all communities, if you want meetings with senior leadership at the Department of Homeland Security, or with people at TSA, at CBP, to talk to them about the issues that you have specifically. The Turkish American community, we would love to have you come in, speak to our leadership, to inform them of the work that you do, to inform them of the travel patterns of your communities. Most people don't know the travel patterns, unfortunately. They don't know that people go back home on a regular basis, why they go home, have the family, they visit, they have businesses. These are things that most of our leadership and most of our agents and officers, they have no idea about. So we encourage communities to come to our offices. We set up meetings with TSA, with CBP, with USCIS, so they know you, they know your communities, your background, and you have a direct conversation with them. And that's a lot of the reasons we do engagement, is that that our officers, our employees, and our agents know who communities are. I talked about this. I talked about our roundtables that we do on a regular basis. So our roundtables usually look like this. They're about anywhere from 70 to 100 people from very different backgrounds. You have African American communities, you have Latino immigration groups, you have faith-based groups, Muslims, Jews, Christians, people who come in and talk about safety, security of houses of worship. And this is something that I'll talk about now. Is I mentioned that we help protect places like stadiums and large shopping malls and critical infrastructure in Washington, D.C., places like that. But one of the things that we've recently done, because we have gotten a lot of complaints of attacks on churches, on mosques, on synagogues, our leadership has now added critical infrastructure. Because we go out at CRCL, when we go talk to people, we listen to people, we went back to the department and we said, we need to add houses of worship and community centers to critical infrastructure. The Department of Homeland Security can help protect and give resources to. So that now that is your community center, houses of worship, they're all part of critical infrastructure, and you are now eligible to get grants. The Department of Homeland Security, through FEMA, we give about $60 million annually grants to groups like yours, centers like yours, for safety and security measures. If you'd like, we send a security expert from the Department of Homeland Security to come and do an assessment of your site, to give you a full report. Usually a security assessment like that will cost about $20,000. The Department of Homeland Security does it for free for critical infrastructure. They come in, they look at all of the infrastructure, what is vulnerable, what you're doing right, what you can improve, and then they give you a full report on how you can improve the security and safety of your institution, of your buildings, or the houses of worship. And we do a lot of that around the country. We've been doing a lot of more mosques recently. For many years we were doing synagogues and churches, but now we've been doing a lot more mosques because we have seen a rise in an increase in attacks on mosques, arson in mosques around the country. So we've been doing a lot more assessments of mosques. So if you are interested in doing a security assessment of this institution, of this building, or any other building that you're affiliated with, we would be able to send in someone to do that assessment. And it gives you very basic things like your exits are well positioned or they're not well positioned. You have, this is where you might need to put a camera. This is where you might need to have extra protection. We have resources where if you can apply for a grant, you can get certain type of windows, certain type of doors. You can get camera systems for the building. So those are part of the things that we've now done to really help faith communities who feel like they are not protected to be well protected as well. I'm sure many of you remember the attack on the church in Charleston, where someone went in and killed 9 people. So a lot of those churches are now taking advantage of the critical infrastructure grants that we have, who have been historically black churches. They feel that they're vulnerable and they feel that they might be attacked. They are now taking advantage of a lot of the work. So I encourage you guys, and I can send more information to community leaders to really take advantage of some of those resources that we have. And then we do a lot of community-specific events. So this is part of the Somali community in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The Somali community in Minneapolis, Minnesota has a lot of challenges with integration. They've had a lot of issues with groups like Al-Shabaab trying to recruit, but at the same time they also have issues with integration, access to language facilities, to English. They have a lot of single mothers who don't have the ability to really look after their children who are growing up. So what we do is we'll go in and we work with specific communities. We're doing a lot of work now with Syrian communities as well, because we have an influx of refugees who are coming into the country. So the subject-specific communities are with Somali Americans, Latino Americans, Syrian Americans who need specific resources from the government, and we connect them. So we'll take in the Health and Human Services Department to talk about integration issues. We will take in the State Department, the Department of Justice, all the different resources available to talk to them, to help them settle, and to help them integrate into their local communities. We'll connect them to local police, we connect them to the mayor's office, things like that to help them better integrate into society. Faith engagement as well. We've been doing a lot more faith engagements because of the heated rhetoric with Muslim communities. We've been doing a lot of faith engagements now with churches, especially minority churches. Black churches, Latino churches. We'll we'll go in, do presentations, help them with their facility as well. So a lot of faith community engagement recently has taken place because of the challenges of faith communities. Community policing and training. So we do a lot of, like I mentioned before, all of our officers, of the hundreds of thousands of people that we have at the airports and at borders, they go through training. And part of the training that we do at Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties is we teach them who different communities are. If you live in an airport in Mobile, Alabama, you're not going to get a lot of diversity of people. You're going to only deal with specific groups of people. So we go into the airports, and we train them on basic things like, Sikh Americans, who are they, and what they wear, and symbols that they might have. In Sikh Americans, a lot of them wear the kirpans. They have something that, it's a religious symbol that they wear. It looks like a knife, it's not sharp, but it's something that they wear on themselves. So when they go through an airport, for a TSA agent, that is completely foreign. They won't know what that is. And so what we do is we go educate them. For Muslims who come back from Hajj, they have Zamzam water with them. And they bring Zamzam water, so, they fly into maybe some place like Dulles Airport, or New York, LaGuardia, or Newark, or Chicago. Agents might know, you might have Muslim agents. But if you fly into a place like Atlanta even, or you fly into Kentucky, or you fly into Tucson Airport, people won't know. You tell them this is holy water, they won't understand what that is. And unfortunately, a lot of times, when some people brought in Zamzam water, they confiscate it and they empty it. And people get very upset. People get extremely upset. And so we go in and we tell them what Zamzam water is, what a kirpan is, what types, what are head coverings. Some people might wear the hijab. Some people might wear a turban if they're Sikh Americans. So all of these you might not think about it, but our officers on a daily basis don't know, they've never dealt with any of these. And they're human beings. They watch Fox News. They watch CNN. They watch all of the same news networks that we watch, and they get impacted by a lot of those different, whatever you call it, rhetoric. They get impacted by it. So we go in and we help them understand. We do trainings for them. Each one of our officers has to go through these trainings. And next time you go to the airport, you might notice these posters are mandated at every checkpoint at airports. So if you go, next time you pay attention, you'll probably see the different types of headwear. When people wear hijab, they might wear it in different ways. Someone from South Asia wears hijab different from someone from Turkey, or the Arab world, or Indonesia. So a lot of these we try to help people, our agents understand, and we train them on this. We have thousands and thousands of agents, so you can imagine trying to train them, and they're constantly bringing new agents in. That's part of what we do at the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties as well. So next time you go to the airport, if you look around, you'll see these posters on the wall there. They don't always pay attention to it, unfortunately, but it's there. And we try to, on an annual basis, make sure that people think about it and are trained about these issues. So we have also community awareness briefs. In the more recent years, something that the Department of Homeland Security is dealing with now is the issue of violent extremism. Violent extremism in places like Syria, Somalia. And that is also the mandate of the Department of Homeland Security, to deal with domestic violent extremism. So whether it is violent extremists like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, or something that the media doesn't usually talk about, but we deal at the Department of Homeland Security with a lot, is domestic violent extremists, militia groups, white supremacist groups, right-wing Christian groups. We deal with a lot of those challenges as well. And I travel we do a lot of work in Colorado. Colorado, one of our biggest challenges is the issue of domestic violent extremists. We have a lot of militia groups. We have a lot of right-wing supremacist groups, white supremacist groups. So DHS, on a regular basis, tries to go out and does community awareness briefs. This is about a 2 to 3 hour presentation on how these groups recruit, and on how these groups try to bring people into their fold, try to convince people whether they be ISIS, whether they be a militia group, or whether they be Al-Qaeda. We do a lot of these, what are called community awareness briefs. We also do community resilience exercises, where we bring in law enforcement and we bring in communities. And they work through scenarios together. And they talk about some of these issues together. Because what we've realized is that law enforcement, also like our agents at the local level, they don't know communities. They don't know the difference between a Turkish person and a Syrian person. They don't know the difference between a Pakistani or an Indian. They don't know the difference between even Mexican and someone from Guatemala. It's just, these are very basic things that most of them don't know because they're not exposed to or engaging. So we'll go in, we bring communities, we bring law enforcement, they sit down together, we give them a scenario. We say, work this out. You see somebody at a stadium taking pictures at night. What would you do? We give that to the communities. Say you were a police officer, what would you do? And then we tell the police officer, take your police officer hat and you be a community member, and how would you react if someone from your community is being accused of taking pictures of a stadium at night? Like, how would you think about that? And the funny thing is, usually communities, when they act like police officers, they go even harder than the police officer would go. They say, oh, you arrest them right away, detain them. So what we try to, but then the police officers realize, oh, this also has consequences. If this goes to the media, if it goes to the public, then this community is stigmatized. Their kids are stigmatized. And so we try to bring them together to help understand the different scenarios and that play out. So this is one of our very important exercises called community resiliency exercises. And maybe one day we can do one of these here as well with the community. So that's a brief kind of background of what we do at the Department of Homeland Security. Our focus is really trying to get communities to understand who we are, what we do, and how we can serve them better. Like I said, please, my email address is there. Please, if you have any issues at the airports, if you have any issues with TSA agents, Border Patrol agents, if you feel that you're constantly being delayed, or there's things being written on your boarding passes, or if you have immigration issues or challenges, please don't hesitate to reach out. Email me or email the leadership of the organization. They'll get it to me, and we will try to help and work through some of those issues. Because we understand that as people are trying to, as a department that's trying to implement these laws and policies and procedures, we're human beings and people are going to make mistakes. And so part of our work is to try to correct some of those mistakes and also help the public and help the citizens. So that is a brief presentation. I'll open it up if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, and we can go from there.
We have a question here.
Sure.
But I'll translate for him. So
Sure, please.
İsim benzerliği problemi var benim vize alırken. İsim benzerliği problemi var.
So he has like a name for his visa applications, like somebody similar name with him. I think I kind of addressed that, and I kind of got the question.
3 years ago,
Yes.
I had a problem. I'm waiting about 1 year for visa, F2 visa
Okay.
in Turkey. And then I want to change my visa this summer, but I'm afraid of that I'm waiting. Yani beklemek istemiyorum. Bu hızlandırmak için aldım. Redress kontrol numarası verdiler. Ben başvurdum buraya.
Oh, so he did the trip. He has
Okay.
a redress control number too.
Okay.
But
And he
when
hasn't
you
heard back? Has he heard back?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a redress kontrol numaram var. Ne yapayım?
Ama size orada bir şey dediler mi?
Geri
Kontrol
dediler.
dediler.
O siz değilsiniz ama bu süreç böyle zor bir süreç dediler.
Okay, well, he got a general answer for that. Well, we know you're not that person, but it's like a difficult process, something like that.
But he's still facing delays or?
Not really. He's afraid to go. So you're afraid
Yes.
to go to Turkey for a visa change, right?
Ya
Is that
asıl
it?
sorum şu, bu yaz başvurumda beklememek için ne yapmalıyım? Yani bu tekrar ülkeye takmamak için.
Türkiye'de mi?
Evet, Türkiye'de başvuracağım. Business vizeye başvuracağım.
So he's gonna apply for a business visa in Turkey, and he's afraid that his visa may be delayed. But I guess is that in your area? You're not State Department.
Oh, so in Turkey.
Yeah,
So I mean, if he sends it over, then we can send it to our colleagues at the State Department,
I see.
and we can try to connect him to people at the State Department.
Okay.
So that's another other thing that we do is, even if it's not related directly to DHS, we have colleagues in other departments that we can send information to.
Email atın o size yönlendirecek
Yeah.
olursa da.
Thank you.
You go. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for coming out, reaching out to the other communities like this. So as an educator, what do you guys do to reach out all the like different schools? There are a lot of private, public, schools. So what do you do? What kind of programs do you organize?
So in terms of schools, the Department of Education is the one that does a lot of the outreach to schools. And whether it's curriculum or whether it's civil rights, the Department of Education actually has a civil rights division as well, just like we have a civil rights division. But the thing is, when we do our quarterly roundtables everywhere, on all the cities, the Department of Education also comes to those roundtables. So the Department of Education, like I told you, we're doing bullying programs around the country. We're doing that in partnership with the Department of Education. They have national programs where they go in, they educate people, they inform people about what bullying is and how the Department of Education can actually help and maybe bring a case against, whether it's a school or individuals, but they are educating a lot of the schools at the state level. So the Department of Education has a lawyer, a civil rights representative in the majority of states, and they're the ones that work with the local Department of Education, with the school boards, with universities to try to educate people. So if there are complaints with schools specifically, we work with our partners at the Department of Education to help get those resolved. Yeah.
And sorry.
Oh,
can I-
sorry.
Like the Justice Department or our local police enforcement or FBI, they have programs to kind of select some community leaders, they educate them, like FBI has a Citizens Academy. Our
right.
Local police enforcement also has a
Yeah.
academy like that. Does DHS do anything like that? Because I've gone to the local police enforcement and also FBI Citizens
Yeah.
Academy, which was, I think, so helpful, so informative. So, like,
We
do you
don't.
guys do anything?
We don't at this point have anything like that, but actually we're in the conversation about creating something like that, especially because we have so many of our component agencies impact the public, but we're in the process of thinking of something like that, and hopefully that's something that in the next couple of years where we'll be able to develop. At this point we haven't, but that is something that we're looking to develop. Yes. And when we do, I'll let you know.
All right.
I'll make sure I send it out to the
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Is it okay for a custom officer to ask U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident, why did you go to Turkey, for example, for us? Or why did you go to another country? Why did you visit there?
Yeah.
Is it okay to ask this question?
Is it just why did you go or
Yeah.
why did you visit? So that's a very general question. That's generally okay. So if even when I travel for work internationally. Like I have an official passport, and even when I come in, the border agent will ask me, "What was the purpose of your travel? Why did you, why did you go to?" My last trip was to Bosnia. They said, "Why did you go to Bosnia?" I went from Bosnia to Doha, Qatar, and
You don't have
the
special
guy.
passport?
Sorry.
You don't have special passport?
I do. I have an official passport, and still, when the guy asked, why did you visit Bosnia? Why did you visit Doha?
So do you explain?
Yeah, so I went for work. I do. I do explain. So something like a question like that is very general. A lot of people will get asked that question. Why did you go to Mexico? Why did you go to Cancun? I went for vacation. Why did you go? Now the problem happened is if they ask you why did you go to Turkey, and you say, well, I went to visit family, and then they ask questions that you feel are very personal and intrusive, or like, whose house did you stay in, or did you pray while you were there, or did you go to the mosque? these are the type of questions we hear from people sometimes. And so those can be more intrusive, and those might be the ones that people complain to us. So a general question is, why did you visit? And that's okay to answer. I always tell the story of a colleague that we have at the State Department. He used to work at the Department of Homeland Security. His name is Irfan Saeed. And Irfan Saeed has a top secret clearance. So this is the highest level clearance you can get as a employee of the U.S. government. It's what the intelligence communities, that type of clearance that intelligence communities have. But poor guy has a name match. There's some Irfan Saeed out there who's a big drug trafficker. And so every time Irfan Saeed travels, even when he's going out of the country for work, for the State Department, he gets secondaried. He gets stopped, they pull him aside, they ask him extra questions, and he says, listen, I'm traveling on my official capacity. I have a top secret clearance. But he gets pulled over because a lot of it is automated, right? It's computers. It's computers saying, oh, there's a match in a name, stop this person. So whether it's name matches or travel patterns, people who travel to certain countries a lot, and things like that unfortunately come up. And so, but if you feel that they're asking questions that are intrusive and that you don't think they should be asking you, that's when you can remember those questions and also take their name and their badge number. That's important. And then you let us know, and we'll try to work on why they would ask a question like that. Yeah.
And I have a second question.
Sure, please.
Do you think the role of Trump's speech for recent Musk threats, do you think there's that
impacts? Yeah, so I can't get into specific individuals, but in general, I think unfortunately the climate about immigration, about refugees, about Muslims, about terrorism, all these do have a real life impact. And we see it. We're hearing from communities. And that's why we do these forums in places like Denver and in St. Louis and in Charleston and all over the country we're doing them. We're going in, we're hearing from communities. I was in Phoenix recently, and a lot of the immigration groups who are Latino came and said, our kids are being bullied in school because they're saying, they're immigrants or they're all undocumented, illegal immigrants. And so that type of rhetoric does impact communities. And that's why we tell people, if you feel like you're being impacted, say something, talk to people. If it's in the school, talk to the school administrator. If it's not being resolved, tell someone else. So yes, I think rhetoric generally impacts. And we've done research at the Department of Homeland Security, our Science and Technology Division, where they've looked at when there's a major terrorist attack anywhere in the world, right after that there is an increase in hate crimes that goes up. And so, when there is a national or international event that takes place, right away usually you see a spike in hate crimes. And so, for instance, right after the San Bernardino attacks that took place, because our Secretary Jay Johnson, was very concerned that hate crimes will go up, he asked us to organize an event at a mosque here in Northern Virginia. He said, I want to go to the mosque, and I want all the media outlets to come with me, and I want to sit with Muslim leaders, and I want to go talk to Muslim children, and I want to go into the mosque and show people that this is not, American Muslims are part of America and American society. And he did that. He went to at the Adams Center, and he was, he stood with imam, he stood with a rabbi, imam, and a pastor. He met with Muslim children, and then he spoke to the media. The New York Times was there, Washington Post was there, CNN was there. Everybody came out because he wanted to make a point that, after an attack or an incident like this, unfortunately, you see an increase in hate crimes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Great.
Are you present at the presidential rallies? How does your work overlap with FBI or with the presidential?
Secret Service.
Secret Service.
Secret Service, yeah. So Secret Service is, every presidential candidate, major candidate, has Secret Service protection when they request it. And so, yes, all of our Secret Service officers or provide security for the major candidates. And we're constantly looking at how they act while they're at these rallies. There was an incident I know that made the news about a certain Secret Service agent, and so that made the news. And so the department looks at things like that. The Secret Service itself has an inspector general, but then our office also can look at things like that. So yes, Secret Service is there at all these rallies, but the Secret Service's role is really mainly to protect the individual. So Secret Service is not out there to control the crowds, to control the flow. Their main job is to protect the individual. It's generally the security, local law enforcement, people like that that is there to protect the attendees or traffic flow. Secret Service mainly is there to protect the individual.
So if there is any delays in H-1B green card
Please.
applications,
Please reach out.
you are.
Yes, please reach out to us. That we do a lot of that. When we go to communities, that's one of the things we tell them. If you feel like you're being, if the delay is too much, or if you feel that there are missteps, please reach out to us, and we will try our best to help.
Yeah,
you.
we help a lot of kind of community members here
Yeah.
to apply for their either citizenship green card
Yeah.
cases. So sometimes we definitely have these
Please.
kind of cases.
Yeah, like I said, my contact information, and then the leadership also has our contact information. We can, if you want to get together people who are going through some of those challenges, we can come and meet with them, and we can come and talk to them. So that's something that we do on a regular basis.